Welcome to Money 911, where we dive deep into the world of personal finance from extraordinary perspectives. I'm your host, Kris Miller, and today we have the exceptional Dr. J. Zigmont with us. He's the founder of Child-Free Wealth and an expert in financial lives of child-free individuals. Welcome, Dr. J. Jay, it's fabulous to have you here on Money 911. And we were just having such a great conversation. We got to turn the record button on. So,
it always happens. The best conversations are just before or just after the podcast. I always wish I recorded those.
I know. I should just automatically have it on. Anyway, well, we were just having some great conversations on life transitions and a living legacy, and we have a lot of similarities of conscious giving, and so before we dive into all of that, maybe tell us a little bit about your journey. You're a child-free individual. Like, I'm a child-free individual too. So you lit up to me as like, this would be a great conversation, because I literally consciously chose not to have kids because of, a spiritual path that I was on. And because of that, they all became my kids. And so there's more responsibility, right?
That's fair.
Right.
For me, my wife and I were child free. And when I was studying to become a CFP, the interesting thing was there was never once a mention any of the education about being child free. Like, everything assumes you either do have kids or you will have kids.
Right.
And like, I got that on this path, and I've got a new book coming out, The Child-Free Guide with Money. The first chapter is, Are We Weird? And that was my research question. Like, are we weird? And my wife and I were two PhDs. We sit around talking about research studies at dinner. Like, we're a little weird. I mean, we are. But the question is, are we weird for being child-free? And at the time, I didn't even know the term child-free existed. I just knew we just didn't have kids. And I started doing research on it, and I found there's a child-free subreddit. That place, it's got its own challenges, but it's got 1.5 million people in it. I was like, okay, we're not a small group. And I'm a researcher by nature, so I've been researching this for the past 3 years or so. And come to find out, 25% of the U.S. is child-free, yet nearly all the financial advice you get out there assumes you either do or don't or plan on having kids. Like, we're just overlooked.
Right.
And in a world, let's be real, we're in a political world where childless cat lady was like thrown around like a negative term.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's got to be out there helping this community. And I'm the founder and CEO of Child-Free Wealth. We're a life and financial planning firm for child-free people. I write about this. You said this is my second book coming on it. Like, I'm trying to get the word out there that, like, it does change just about everything of your life and financial plan. And
right.
Representation matters. We want people to be talking about being child-free. It's not better or worse. It's just different.
And what got me is that there's so many parentless children here already that, that people could take those on. But those that choose not to, like you have what's your book called? Portraits of Child-Free Wealth. Is that right?
That was the first one. Yeah.
And you got some powerful stories inside of there that really touched your heart. And maybe just give us one of those stories that lit up your heart and made you on this child-free passion or person, because, I know a lot of people are talk about it nowadays and they have political things tied to it, but you came from a different place on it.
Yeah, I think what the Portraits book did is, I gathered 26 stories of what it's like to be child-free. And I use that as a framework for pretty much all my work since then. And I think one of the ones that surprises people most is that being child-free doesn't automatically make you rich. You're not like, hey, I'm child-free, and like checks fall from the sky. And I think that's one of those things that just is like this misunderstanding. I had somebody in the book, her and her husband moved back to the US in February, just before COVID hit. Okay. So they moved back to the US from another country. And imagine trying to find a job right before the shutdown. Like literally, they were on like one of the last flights in.
Ugh,
And the answer was they couldn't.
right.
And they struggled and they were having difficulty. Um, and we were talking to them and they said, hey, we've made a lot of improvement. This year, we moved from having an air mattress that we live on to a regular mattress. And I was like, awesome. Congratulations. You've made, like, you
Moving
got to give
forward.
it to them. They're making improvements even though all the challenges. And I think what that shows is like, I can tell you lots of stories of child people travel the world and doing all fun stuff. But it's also just the lived experience of, there's good times, bad times, there's struggle, income disparity still exists. And the way I look at it is for those child-free people that are barely keeping their head above water, if they had a kid, they would drown. And, that's as simple as it comes. And I use that example because there's just all these assumptions that, just not right.
Right. Well, it's so there's such judgment. I experienced that, and I consciously chose not to have children. I was on a spiritual walk, kind of like a nun, not in a Catholic church,
Hmm?
but gave my life to God. But in that, people judge you and mocked you, and now 40, 50 years later, it's sort of respected, because you're being conscious about it. And then that's the same way that you can be conscious about the money. It really doesn't matter. People are broke whether people aren't taught about money, because you go to school, you learn how to make money, you get out of school, what do? Go make money and give it to somebody else to gamble. And people don't even know where their
Yeah.
money is, right? And then it's
So,
this roulette wheel where is it going to be up or down when they retire? But
yeah,
most
my joke is I talk about two taboo topics at once: being child free and wealth. Like, you
yeah,
want like people don't talk about their sex life all day long. They don't want to talk about their money. Like they don't want to and I'm just like, my team doesn't love this, but I do. I want a shirt, and we're gonna order one that just says I'm proudly child free and wealthy. And they're like, wow, that's kind of like edgy. I'm like,
mm-hmm.
no, it's not. Like we say child free wealth, living life child free wealth means you have time, money, and freedom to do what you enjoy. It doesn't automatically mean you're rich and have a bunch of money, but we can talk about these things in a reasonable manner, understand other people are struggling, understand our own privilege, acknowledge it, and still work through it. Because I think if we started talking, the shame would disappear, the guilt would disappear, all the other baggage that comes with it.
Right. And that's what's happened. No, we're not talking anymore. And it's okay for you to think what you do. I mean, that's the free will. So we should be able to freely talk about it. And people think of the costs of raising children and the unexpected financial benefits of being child free. But one thing just to stipulate here is that whether you have a child or you don't have a child, there's still the same money principles that people have to pay attention to. And unfortunately, what is it? 70%, 80% now are married or, child or not child are living paycheck to paycheck. And that includes people that make up to $100,000 a year. So there's a definitely broken financial system of education here, right?
There is, and I think it's basic financial literacy. I mean, when I went to high school, which is a few years ago, the only thing they taught was how to balance a checkbook, which is
Right.
a giant waste of time right now. Like
Yeah.
useless.
Right.
Eh, You know, you go to college nowadays and they hand you a T-shirt and a credit card. Like,
Exactly.
you know,
Ugh.
and
Yes.
and I'm someone who, I've got a PhD. I've done a lot of academics. I've taught in universities, and I'm still like, in what world are we comfortable giving an 18-year-old a mortgage payment and
Exactly.
having them sign on for $100,000 in debt? I'm like, the 18-year-old version of me was dumb, like just dumb.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone who believes they were smart as a kid, come on. But like, we're not taking the time to understand the basics. We have a program in our book called the 8 No Baby Steps. The first 3 are like, get out of debt, have an emergency fund, have a budget,
Right.
chicken soup for the soul. Like, Everybody needs something. It doesn't need to be a formal budget app. You can use whatever flavor of it you like. Some way to understand what's coming in and what's going out. Spend less than you make.
Right.
It's it is
It's
not rocket science, but I was not taught any of that. My story, I actually made my first million by the time I was 21. I got lucky. I was working for a company that went IPO, did well. I spent it by the time I was 25. What do you expect? You give a 21-year-old $1 million, it's not going to last long. Like I did some good stuff for my family. I did some good stuff for others, but like, my goal was not, hey, let me save this and live off this for the rest of my life. I didn't even know that is an option.
right. So what did you end up doing? Spending it all?
Oh, I ended up taking some time off of work, and I went back to school. So it actually funded some of the time that I could have used. I actually am one of those weird people. Went from no degree to a PhD in 5.5 years, and my entire college cost me less than 10 grand.
Wow.
So, like, I did the system. I paid off some of my parents' loans, my sister's loan. I tried to help where I could. That being said, some of those may or may not be great financial decisions, at least looking back.
Right. Well, financial freedom is a dream for many. And so maybe talk about it, a child-free lifestyle offers, if people, the younger people now are opting out of having children. There's a seems to be a trend, and the older people are freaking out because they think that it's going to be the end of the population, right? But actually, there's plenty of children to take care of here already. So that's one of those misnomers. But maybe
Yeah, if
you
you
could,
look,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, if you look at the younger generations, the number of people choosing to be child free is going through the roof. And we actually did a study on this to look at why people choose to be child free. And about a third are just like never wanted to have kids. Fine. Another 30% or so are finance, but most people had more than one reason. And they're talking about like medical reasons and environmental reasons and political reasons and social. And I was like, wow, this really deep thought.
Right.
And what I found is that the younger generations, we're talking Gen Y, Gen Z, they're pausing for a second before they have kids and going, is this for
Yeah.
me?
Right.
And it's that one moment of like, should I do this or not? And I've come to the conclusion that many child-free people put more thought into not having kids than a lot of parents put into having kids. Because the default choice is you have kids. Like it's what you do. Versus, you're going to be mindful about it and think about it. I had somebody in my book, she was 21 and got sterilized.
Mm.
She's not changing her mind. Like there's this assumption, oh, when you get older, you'll change your mind. No. And I think as people are looking at the life they want to live, having kids is a choice. But what I heard from a parent once, and I really like this, they said, if you're going to have kids, it needs to be two enthusiastic yeses,
Right.
not, once,
Whoops.
maybe,
Or
uh,
whoops. Right.
yeah, I mean, I had somebody for my book I interviewed, and he is child free. His wife is child free. They got married, child free. A few years into their marriage, she changed her mind and wanted to have kids. And I was like, as a researcher, I'm like, I got to ask the question, like, what'd you do? And he was explaining, he said, listen, I decided to have kids because I'd rather me be miserable than her be miserable. And I was like, oh, that's deep. I don't know if I agree or not. That's a separate, I'm researching. I'm not,
Right.
giving feedback. And I said, so what happened? And for fertility reasons, they didn't end up having kids. But I was really intrigued by, okay, I'm willing to sacrifice 18, 21 years of my life and not be happy about it. And what I always worry about, people say like, oh, won't you regret not having kids? And the data, by the way, says no, people don't. 94% of child-free people say they're happy. But the same data says that 18% of parents will publicly admit on a study they regret having their kids.
Ooh, 18%.
And that's the ones who will admit it,
Yeah.
you know? And I'm like, wow. I'd much rather regret not having kids than regret having kids. No.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And taking the pause that they just don't jump in, they take the pause to reflect of what's the highest way to go if everything happening. Right. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when I look at my child free folks and have these conversations with them, there's a standard life script that says you go to school, get married, have kids, pass the
right.
money to generation, all that. It's part of the American dream. The house, the white picket fence, 2.5 kids, a dog. Well, you know, in these days, that's not what everybody wants to live. 32% of child free folks will never marry. So we're talking about a large percentage versus 2.5% of parents. We're talking about a large percentage that just will never marry. They're okay with it. They're living different lives. We call them soloists, single, no kids. We've got other people living in groups or in couples, just not married. Like they're making different choices. And one of the really interesting things, so the Pew Research put out a study on child free folks. They called it adults without kids, but I'll use the term child free. And they looked at median income per month for adults over 55. What they found was that in parents, the gender wage gap per month is about $1,800. That's a gender wage gap we talk about all the time.
Wow.
But in child-free couples, the gap was $120,
Yeah.
which in statistical terms is nothing. Like there's no gap effectively. So when people choose, or not by choice, depending on whatever their situation may be, to be child-free, the gender gap disappears. And you actually look at the data as women are more educated, have more access to contraception, the number of kids keeps going down. And there's different options in life. It used to be old school was, do you want to be a career woman? I don't really love that term, but just that's where it came from. And I'm like, you can find the life you enjoy and enjoy it. Our way of saying it in the book, we say we want to simplify your finances so your life can be amazing. That's it. Simplify it so it can be amazing. What amazing means to you, I don't care. I got some people it's a garden, some people it's travel, some people it's volunteering, some people it's take care of their nephews, whatever it is. But you can live your best life. We're talking about like the Maslow higher end of self-actualization as an option. And that's kind of countercultural. And like, I think it's scary to some people that people are making those choices. But the data says, it's not necessarily, being child free is not necessarily going to make you rich off the top, but it may make you happy. And that's a
That's the
different type of riches.
that's the whole deal there, right? I mean, you can have all the wealth in the world, but no joy. So definitely. Well, maybe, people would think, what's some of the unexpected financial benefits of being child free? And no, I don't have to pay for college, but maybe do a little bit more deep
Yeah.
dive of what does that look like?
So the way I look at it for most child people, I kind of start at the end and work my way backwards. So most child-free people do not have passing on money to the next generation as a priority.
Mhm.
The way I say it for my nephews, they get what's left over. If they get 10,000 or 100,000, that's fine. If they get $1,000,000, I probably made a mistake. And the reason I say they made a mistake because if I'm 90 when I die, they're 60. They don't need the money like they would like now. So we've got college funds and all that. But if your goal is not to pass on money to the next generation, there's actually a point in your life where you can have too much money, which sounds really weird. But we get to this point, we tend to find it somewhere kind of late 30s, early 40s, where child-free people start hitting this child-free midlife crisis. They hit their personal, professional, financial goals, and they're like, now what?
Now what? Right.
What's
Mm-hmm.
the next 40 years of my life? Like, what do I
Right.
want to do? And we have the Chop for Wealth podcast, and one of our top downloaded episodes is "I'll Make You Quit Your Job," because my staff started tracking how many times I told people to quit their job, and I'm like, listen, you're working a job you hate to save money for an estate you don't care about. Stop.
Mm.
And they're like, well, I always wished. I don't know why I got a lot of people. I always wished I would be a librarian. Okay, let's go do that. They're like, but librarians don't make any money. I'm like, you don't need it. You don't need more money to give away when you die. And they're like,
Right.
I could actually do that? Yes. I had somebody who wants to like make a business doing flower pots. Now, by the way, not going to make a lot of money, but she enjoys it. Let's go do that. Let's give up that six-figure salary for the
Yeah.
life you enjoy.
It's such a, yeah.
It messes people's heads. Like we spend more time with our clients talking about spending money than saving money. Like they're like, there's no way this is true.
Success, I think success is being redefined. And what you're talking about is actually really when you, for example, I mean, I literally did this halfway through my business, midlife, successful business. Then, okay, now take what your gift is and repurpose it and help others. And
Yep.
so now I'm living my legacy. I'm not going to wait till I die and give some money to someone I won't ever see their face, but I'll say, hey, these are amber. I got them in Israel and I'm giving them to you, or something that I could just see them light up. And, I might change my mind, but yeah, anyway, the living legacy of living now, because really, what are you going to take with you? Right. And
Well,
it's really the joy and the happiness of helping and loving others and helping people. Right.
you're on the right path. We call it recondoing your life. You get rid of the things that don't bring you joy. Do more of the things that do bring you joy.
Right.
Like, and people are like, that sounds weird. I'm like,
It sounds
no,
too easy.
but like that's life. Like that's optimal life.
Right.
And we often ask our folks kind of what impact do you want to make? We're not going to have a genetic legacy. What is your legacy? What
Yeah.
do you want to be known as? And I think the challenge is nobody ever asks those questions. So I'll jokingly ask, what do you want to be to grow up? And people always laugh at me. And then I'm like, no, seriously, what do you want to do? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, you got 40 years left. What do you want those to be? And what happens is for parents, when they hit that kind of midlife crisis moment, they put their goals onto their kids. They're like, well, Johnny has to go to Yale. Johnny has to do this. Like, and there's a separate discussion on is that good or bad for them. But what happens is because you're child free, you don't have an answer. And so my book, the first half is all about figuring out what life you want to live. And I actually don't provide any answers either. I'm just being transparent on that. What I provide are a whole bunch of questions. What do you care about? Who are the people you care about? What are the causes you care about? What type of impact do you want to make? What do you want to be known as? And I started asking these questions, and it's always interesting. I had somebody very high up in business, doing very well, public figure. And I said, hey, we write your obituary, the second line of it, does it start with being this executive position? He goes, not a chance. I said, okay, then why you put all the time and effort into it? But we'll come back to that. I said, okay, if it doesn't say that, what do you want it to say? And he's like, I would love to set them to say I was a good man who tried his best. Okay, what does that mean to you? And as you start pulling apart, people start realizing, my identity, which most Americans think of first as their job, is not really what I want to be known as or what matters to me. So now maybe I can start investing my money differently, spending my money differently, giving differently. And that's the stuff money's for. I mean,
Exactly.
when
Right.
when you're struggling, this sounds like I'm crazy. Like if you're barely making ends meet, this sounds way too out there. And I get that. We call it the rent and ramen phase. You're barely making enough money for rent and ramen. Like, yeah, that's tough. But at some point, you're going to have money. And then the question is, for what point? What do you want to do with it? And I think as a society, we don't talk about that. It's just I'm just going to pass it on. Like I'm just going to and even if you're passing the charity, a lot of child free people are charitably minded. You're better off passing that during your lifetime because you get tax breaks and you get to see the impact.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's true. I mean, having people, we don't know how to ask those questions to ourselves. So having the right questions, like prompting AI, right? Where if you don't ask the right question, you're not going to get the results or the answer that's needed. So because this isn't a talked about thing, it's so important to have the right questions to talk about it. What's one piece of personal advice that you've given someone who's child free and they're eager to create lasting wealth and fulfillment.
So I have a client who's got a bunch of money, you know, over $10 million, and they're in their 70s. And the question is like, what do you do with it? And good question. And they enjoy travel. That's kind of like their one thing that they're really enjoying in retirement. Awesome. I said, how about we do this? How about we set a goal that you spend an equal amount on travel as you do as giving? And they're like, oh, okay, maybe. Because they were like, let me give it when I pass on. So we
Right.
started looking at like who would you give it to and looking at the different places. And it's always interesting to kind of like what charities are worth giving to versus not. But they're now at the point where they're spending, six figures on travel and six figures on giving. And it helps them tax wise, helps them financially, all that. And I always ask the clients who do this, which did you get more out of, the travel or the giving? And every time the answer is the giving.
Right.
And
Exactly.
that's to their causes. I don't, you
Yeah.
pick whatever the cause is. Like whatever floats your boat, whatever gets your heart going, awesome. And they're like, it's the giving. I'm like,
Right.
okay, let's get you on the board of that group. Let's work on maybe naming a scholarship after you or your family members. Let's work on giving to people that really made a difference in your life. We do a lot of work with people on how to support and give to family members. How do you do that in a dignified way
Right.
and help them? Like
Yeah.
I've worked with people on how about we pay off your family member's mortgage. And they're
Right.
like, well, they would never take a check from me. I'm like, no, we'll call the bank. Like, we're going to write the check to the bank. By the way, the bank's not going to turn down that check. I'm telling you right now. Like,
Mm. Right.
and it can be completely life changing. And I think what happens is you've spent so many years scrimping and saving and like putting every dollar away. And I'm like, that was great. It got you there. But what do we want to do in the next chapter?
Exactly. And this is so, bullseye. I have a document preparation server. We've made over 6,000 living trusts. And this is a conversation I've had with thousands of people. No one is ever the same. And there's, and if they're giving to family, there's always these so many issues that, like you said, could have been, talked about before and resolved before. In my family, we did a lot of like I'm recording my dad's life for his memoirs, and it goes way back, generations. So we have a whole long family story that we can share. So it's if you have the right questions, then you're going to get the right answers. So I think that's one very cool thing.
So let me tell you an interesting story. I interviewed somebody the other day for my podcast, Megan Kane, who runs NPR's Life Kit. And she has a new book out talking about the single life and how do you embrace being single and all that. And we are talking about the book and we are talking about estate planning, all that. And she started sharing that her grandfather wrote her letters that were given to her like all throughout her life, different years, from his experience of being an estate attorney
Hmm.
and like what mistakes not to make. And she was explaining to me and giving stories. And I'm like, Megan, listen, that's the book you need to write. Like, I want to see those letters.
Right.
And she was talking about how much they impacted her. And I'm like, that's the point.
Right.
Take the
Exactly.
time to have the impact you want to make. Oop, hold on, I had a microphone issue. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
just take the time to make that impact. And if that means you have to use your money to buy your time back, people think that's crazy. I'm like, listen, I can spend half a day cleaning my house and cleaning toilets, or I can pay somebody to do it. If I pay somebody to do it, I free up time that I can then have more of an impact with. And they were
Yeah.
like, I never thought of it that way.
I
I'm
know.
like,
So simple, right?
you
Yeah.
know, I don't, I joke. There's two jobs I hired first. One was somebody to help clean the house, and the other one was somebody to do my social media. And both of them because they're dirty jobs. Like I don't want to do either of them.
I
But
don't
like,
want to do it. Yeah.
but the whole point is you can buy back time and then make an impact with it.
Exactly. And time these days, as fast as it's going, is the big value, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Buy back your time. That you tell me a little bit more about your book and tell everybody where they can get it.
So the Child Free Guide to Life and Money comes out December 31st. I don't know when this is airing, but if it's before then, we got some pre-order specials, childwealth.com/book. And what we do is we talk about the first half is what life do you want to live and how do you write your own script? And it's a choose your own adventure type book. Like I grew up with choose your own adventure books, love them. Like if you're at this point, go to this page. And it's not meant for you to like read cover to cover and just dive in. It's meant for you to work through and say, okay, what do I want my life to look like? Then you go into what do I want my finances to look like to match that. And we have a program in there we call it 8 No Baby Steps, which outlines a lot of the financial things that we have to do with child-free folks. It goes into things like, child-free people don't need life insurance, they need disability insurance, long-term care, how do we fund that? Like there's a lot of great stuff in there, but it's specifically for child-free people. And I just had a meeting with my publisher earlier today. And in this political world, I made a pitch to him. I said, listen, there's never been a book like this on the bestseller list that says child free on, or at Target. Actually one of the biggest booksellers in the world, like the Target and Walmarts of the world, they sell a lot of books. And I said, it would mean something for the book to be on the shelf at Target where somebody can walk in and go, oh, I'm seen as a child free person. And that's part of the mission of the book is like representation matters. Like, let's make sure
right.
Child-free people are there. Now it's become kind of a thing I'm on. I'm like, I gotta get in Target. I don't know how I do that, but like, how do I get it like to a point where people can see it publicly? And part of that is because if you don't have a voice as a community, that silence often leads to bad things and people taking advantage and judging and all that.
Exactly. And that's why I wanted to have you on and have this conversation and take all the judgment away of what people think, and you're not in the box, but really, empower them so they know exactly, how to transform all of those things into living a joyful life and doing something that right at these times could be more appropriate. Honestly, if I had my choice and I was younger, I wouldn't want to bring a child into this world right now because I think it's in a shift. And there's plenty of us here that to take care of, and whatever choice or reason everybody jumps off on is their own individual thing. But it's so valuable. And it's so valuable to have those questions too that you have. Jay, it's been really fun talking to you today. What's your one final cherry on the top you want to leave with everybody?
Whether you're child free or not, pause and think about what impact you want to make and just focus on that. If your money and your life, your time and effort are not going to that, you're wasting time, money, and effort.
Right. To me, that's the real value right there. And what goes around comes around. So there you go. Thank you. That's a wrap for another thrilling episode of Money 911. We're immensely grateful for Dr. J for sharing his personal insights on how being child-free can impact your finances. If you found this episode as fascinating as we did, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. Stay tuned for more unique, inspiring financial stories. There's so much to learn about healthy money. I hope today's discussion brings you one step closer to securing and protecting your future. So you can get started on the right foot, go to meetwithchrismiller.com and schedule your free financial fitness strategy session. Thank you for listening, and please subscribe to Money 911 so you don't miss our next episode, which includes health, wealth, and peace of mind.